All you need is a bag of holding, one donkey, and and muscles.
Muscles. Hi, welcome to Nothing Venture, Nothing Game. I'm your host, GM Jared, and today I'm joined by Fabio.
Hey.
And Steve.
Yo.
And then we're doing a bit of a new section. This is more of us just talking about stuff that's part of the industry. So tabletop role-playing games, mostly. Specifically, this one I'm talking, we bring up ideas at the table right before we go live, and then I jot them down. So this was one that I brought up to the table, and we were actually in a heated debate about the moment we went live, and then we all just deaded it. And I was like, no, we have to keep going. So the conversation that started this was, I said, I am anti-charisma stat. So if you know anything about Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition or Dungeons and Dragons in general or Pathfinder or many other similar tabletop D20 games, charisma is a stat. And one moment while I bring this up very quickly. So according to the core rule book from Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, charisma measures your ability to interact effectively with others. It includes such factors as confidence, eloquence, and it represents a charming or commanding personality. A check for charisma might arise when you try to influence or entertain others, when they try to make an impression or to tell a convincing lie, or when you are navigating a tricky social situation. The deception, intimidation, performance, and persuasion skills reflect aptitude in certain kinds of charisma checks. And then obviously, it describes what those checks are. Persuasion, deception, performance. Now, I argue charisma limits role playability as well as creates a unnaturally high standard for those people who do not like to role play. And this is my thesis statement. Remove charisma. That's literally what it is. It's remove charisma and allow your players to play themselves. So by that, I mean, let's say I have a player who is not too charismatic or doesn't like to, is fearful of the social interaction, right? Like they might have whatever, right? We all have those moments. Or maybe they feel uncomfortable under the microscope. If I can just say, hey, I walk up to the guard and I would like to chat them up politely and, while chatting them up, see if I can get through or at least get to know their name. Normally a GM would be like, okay, make a persuasion check, right? That's what would happen. Now, because of the explosion of the industry, which is a great thing, a lot of GMs fancy themselves a entertainer, right? So they think their table are entertainers, and then they'd be like, well, you have to get like role play, give me more role play. If we didn't have the charisma based stat, right? If we didn't have persuasion based on charisma, and it was just kind of based off of very similar to the older editions of AD&D and first edition, where there were no skills. It was just kind of like free form, very free form. And I'm not saying get rid of all the skills, right? That's not what I'm saying, get rid of. What I'm saying is, then, okay, make an athletics check. What are you trying to do? I'm going to look them in the eyes and pick up a donkey and just shake the donkey over my head to scare them. That's terrifying. If someone just bench press, like a half orc just came over and just picked the donkey up and just goes, let me in, shake donkey, and then put the donkey down, A, the donkey's intimidated, and B, the guard's going to be intimidated. The guard's going to be like, I don't want none of this. He just shook a donkey. I'm lighter than a donkey.
Donkey shaker.
Yeah.
It's a new character concept right there.
Yeah, yep. Just hard donkey shaking.
Half orc donkey shaker. Next one. I'm making that note right now.
Just gonna write that down. Half orc donkey shaker.
All you need is a bag of holding, one donkey, and and muscles.
Muscles. But that's my statement. Is I personally feel charisma detracts from allowing. I feel like it kind of shoehorns players, because, like, let's say I didn't make a character with any charisma. A lot of times in social situations, because I'm very personal, me personally, I'm more inclined to talk, but then my GM's going to look at me, and then no matter how well I talk, right? No matter how well I articulate why to the guards, hey, listen, man, I got this decree and blah 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 XYZ, and I do it really well. I know my GM's going to say, make a persuasion check. And I look at my sheet, and maybe I dumped in charisma because I wanted to play a battle scarred halfling who's just like from an old warrior. So I dumped charisma to raise strength. So he's like, I have a -1. All right, well, here we go. I roll. I got a 10. All right, so it's a 9. Now, normally 10 is kind of like in 5th edition, it's like the medium number, right? Like that's like a good baseline number. Now I'm at a 9, which is gradually a lot worse. Under 6, 6 under.
What happened?
Had a slight weapons malfunction, but everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
So that's my argument. And I now toss it over to Fabio because Fabio is the counterpoint to my argument.
Yes, I am. So I like Jared's total thought towards his thesis, where he believes that it's a stat that is poo-poo for you. For me, when I look at charisma, my whole point is I definitely feel that I would want charisma in games because I feel it gives you tracks and direction and in order to facilitate those that may not be as charismatic or as those that may not have social prowess as those others. And it gives you a statistical value, or at least a stat value, where you know that, hey, if I'm trying to have a specific type of interaction and I want a specific outcome, I know exactly what skills are applied to it, how it can be applied towards the interaction I'm dealing with, and also what I can specialize in if I want more success in specific outcomes, right? So when I look at charisma, I'm naturally a charismatic person, and it comes sometimes in my favor, but oftentimes at my dismay, right? But that makes things fun for me, whether it's being a person or being a player. And I've played games with people that, aren't, great in normal social interactions, and a lot of them, I've seen them play charismatic characters. One of the things that I've seen them do is they'll use certain things in ways that I normally wouldn't think of. I'll be in an interaction normally, I'm going to lie to this person. And they're just like, oh, well, that's deception. Okay, fantastic. Well, I've seen other people use persuasion and trying to get them on their side and use the absolute truth. They're saying everything that's, right and correct and honest, but they're being very manipulative. And I'm just like, that's interesting. You're telling the truth. You're not lying. You're just being very persuasive. I'm like, oh, I like this. I like this. And then there's the performance where you want to juggle. You want to do something interesting. You want to throw something with a little flair, a little panache, a little zhuzh on top of it. And having a skill where just go, okay, I can specialize directly in performance where I'm going to juggle chainsaws and captivate an audience and have them enthralled by me. It doesn't take a lot of thought. Now, mind you can say, oh, that could be dexterity. But yeah, but there's something about somebody juggling some chainsaws that just has a little bit more than just being good with your hands. There's a little bit of flair that you're bringing in. There's a little that aspect of danger that you're adding into your scenario. And I feel like when you have something with charisma where it puts it in a very specific place, it could help somebody who may not be as imaginative, right? And it also can help your DM who says, hey, you can have a situation where oh, well, I want to distract them. I was just like, okay, how do you want to distract them? I'm like, all right, I want to chuck some stuff in the air and hopefully it works. But I made my character as an amazing juggler. Okay, fantastic. You start throwing things into the air. All of a sudden, the crowd throws a tomato at you because they don't like it. You immediately throw that into your juggling fiasco. You're now doing figure eights as well as juggling. And that's fun to hear and that's fun to see. And it's something specific. There are a lot of people out there that are charismatic and there are a lot of people that are not. And having something that that's set in place that can give you that direction, whether it's you're trying to lie to somebody to get past some guards, you're trying to persuade somebody to sell you something for cheaper, right? You're trying to intimidate them so that you don't have to deal with a fight, right? And having it tied to maybe a specific value where it's my character's not strong, so he's not going to be chucking donkeys at people, right? Or my character's, not as agile. So like he's not going to be juggling donkeys or anything like that. But what he is great at is talking to people. He's very good at speaking and altering their mind. And it may not be based off of intelligence. It may not be based off of like his background or things that he's been through and his wisdom, right? But it's based off his ability to understand people and understanding situations and how to navigate them. I feel that's a very different type of understanding than knowledge. And I feel it's a little bit more specific than wisdom. And having something in place so you can do that, make it make sense, make people put points into it, whether they're going to be fluid in speaking and adding flair and something, panache to their actual conversations. They can say, I want to intimidate them. Cool. Roll for it. You can have that moment and maybe have a DM that's like going to like help you out with that. And if you don't, you at least know the point value of how it will be interpreted in your game. It could be a little dry, may not be as interesting, but it'll at least give you that point where you can say, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is the outcome that I want. I want them to be scared. I'm going to intimidate them. I want them to believe me. I'm going to persuade them. I want to distract them. I'm going to perform in front of them. And you know exactly where that goes and what it does. And I feel that it's important to have that because when you don't know what you're doing and you're not that charismatic, it gives you a line. And if you are, you can just add your flair in yourself.
So that's a really interesting point. So your argument, Fabio, is statistically, I know I can do certain actions because I have a numerical value that allows me to do those actions. And that helps the people who might not be charismatic or like a real charismatic. I think everyone is charismatic as an extent, is just depending on who you are.
There's
and
levels to it.
Yeah. Like not everyone can go up and just have grand speeches, right? Like not everyone can do that. But I think everyone is charismatic at a base level. But I feel, obviously, right? Like this is just more feeling than it is behind anything else, right? Like it's just a conversation. I understand what you're saying where like, hey, first, that player who's using the truth to lie, they're gaslighting those people.
Oh, absolutely.
Gaslighting.
That is the definition of gaslighting.
Gaslighting them.
He does it well, and he stayed within his lawful good. I was just like, this motherfucker is lying.
Gaslighting. You're gaslighting.
Omitting,
but he's not lying.
Look. You were saying that they're lying, but they're not lying. They're speaking the truth and omitting key details. There's a difference.
Omitting information can be considered a form of deception, but at the same time, the way it was great. It was truly like a sight to behold because I really watched him just go. He really just spun the entire view of the situation that they were in and painted it so like, hey, you need to join us, and this is why. And I was like, I would join you.
Yeah,
you got me. You got me. All right.
So I guess now my conversation point now has to evolve, right? As a GM, right? So all three of us have GM'd games. I've played in Fabio's, I've played in Steve. They're clearly playing in mine. So it's a kind of a blessing. Do you think roles are necessary when it's that good?
I feel in certain scenarios, roles are necessary, but if somebody's really good as a GM, I would give people advantage. So if I knew like, hey, I've had characters that were straight up barbarians, dump stat, they're like, yo, I am not putting any points in charisma whatsoever, right? And then they're just like, I want athletics to door off the wall. Like, Steve, we've watched Phelan rip doors off walls, right? And let's go bump this. But at the same time, I've also seen it as like, I'm going into it and I'm going to stand there, flex as hard as possible.
Yeah.
One of somebody we both knew, he's currently paying a paladin in our campaign, is not that charismatic in the game, but he does things where his god is the rock, right? So whenever I say like he casts Bless, the Barama Bull comes down on everybody's head and it's really cool, right? But when he goes, I flex. And we're like, okay, naturally lifts and he body builds and he puts himself into great shape in his personal life. And his character transcends the exact same way. But when he intimidates, he just goes, I flex at him. And I know that's him intimidating. So say, okay, fine. You're flexing at him. And he goes, I was like, do you do anything else? He goes, I flex at him, I wink, and I make my right pec jump, my left pec jump. And the fact that he's describing it, I'm like, all right, you know what? That's scary. Roll with advantage. And it's like, it's fun because I know his stats not that great for charisma because of the way that he built his character. But at the same time, he added that little extra oomph. He added that little extra flair. So because it was that good, I'm going to give him advantage. I feel like as a DM, if somebody says something and they're naturally charismatic and they make it fun, give them that bonus. Give them that advantage. Give them maybe the extra +1 or +2. Or if it's amazing, just say, you know what? You may not have to roll in this particular thing. You can give them the success. But I feel like you can't do that in every scenario because then it's like, all right, well, I don't want to use it. I'm just going to just talk my way into everything. No, be creative. And if you're creative enough, I'll give you the advantage. If it makes sense, I'll give you that bonus. If it doesn't, I'm going to give you disadvantage because that's no good either. Right. And I was like, I'm going to try and intimidate him. How? I flick a booger at him. No, disadvantage. They don't like you. They're mad at you. Go home.
Interesting.
Yeah, so this kind of goes back and forth to, I think, a larger conversation, which we may or may not have here, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. When a character makes a strength check or a dexterity check, we don't ask the character, lift the, I'm lifting the thing, it's so heavy. No, we don't ask them to do that. As GMs, we don't ask people to act out their thing. But I've been in many games with many DMs, and it's always the charismatic characters that get stuck with, you have to say something that makes sense for the charisma check. I never understood why. Or when someone's playing a bard and they want to like, okay, well, when the wizard casts a fireball, we don't ask them how you cast a fireball. When you do stuff as a bard, well, what do you sing? Like, I'm not a goddamn musician. Come on. So this, I think, is a slightly larger topic when it comes to charisma checks and other skills. So I've played in games, different systems, where they take the idea of charisma or being able to talk to people and interact with people, and they roll it into other stats. And that's based into their system. We just recently played Bunkers and Badasses. We played Viking Death Squad, where it was enrolled into Will, which is also a bunch of different skills kind of rolled into one. And you'll notice in a lot of systems that have less than 6 stats, most stats pull double weight because they're trying to condense the amount of stats to have less stats to make it right. So that talking skill may be something so closer to what Jared was talking about. But also some systems like Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons is like, I need to, like, those systems that condense down the stats, they tell you, if you want to be good at talking and this other thing, take this stat. Right? So they kind of lay it out for you. So going back to what Fabio says, like, I need to know, I don't want to have to play guesswork with my character when I'm like, okay, well, I want to be good at talking to people or deception or intimidate or whatever. I just want to be good at, diplomacy and being able to make people agree. I like to know on paper how my character functions. And I think that's my always like biggest thing is like, I want to make sure that in the system, a player knows how to do what they want to do. They may not know what to say, but they may not go, I want to do this. And this is how I'm going to build my character because, well, it says, well, this stat is used for these roles. So it's hard when, in the case of you're like roping it into D&D or Pathfinder where it's not defined, it's defined in using a stat. And that's one of my slight concerns with charisma, which is why I sometimes lean to the idea of getting rid of it, is that charisma is not used for anything else except talking or those social. It's a social stat, and it doesn't add to anything else. You want to take strength. Strength is good for combat, and it's also good for usually a skill. Like in the case of, I think Pathfinder and D&D, it's the athletics skill.
Athletics, yeah.
Dexterity, it's a slew of skills, and also, I know in Dungeons and Dragons, everything is a save. Like you can have saves in every stat. In Pathfinder, it's a little different. Not to go into that, but if I'm good at Dex, I'm good at throwing things or using ranged weapons, and a bunch of skills and saves. Well, wisdom, I'm good at like perceiving whether someone's lying to me, and also my wisdom save. And I'm also good at this, a bunch of skills. Charisma, it's just charisma skills. And sometimes I feel that that's a missed opportunity of having either that's that stat do more or have other stats do the job of it. But in the system we're in, to make things less confusing, I'm more of the fan of just keeping charisma, just so the players understand how to play.
Interesting. So I like how Steve is literally the exact like he was like, I agree because it just doesn't do enough, but also I like it because of math. And I respect that. Like Steve was like, I like it because of math, which is kind of what Fabio was saying. He's like, listen, statistically, I know where I'm coming from, and Steve was like, listen, statistically, I need to know where I'm coming from, because if I'm a new player, it's good to know, like, how do I, like, what if I want to talk? What if I want to play a charisma-based character? So mathematically, I need to have an option that shows that. I think my idea is allowing creativity to shine through. Like Fabio said, with that paladin character, I fear that it also limits the player. Like I played my first character ever in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition was Dargo. If you know what Dargo is from Farscape, I love Farscape. At this point, remember, you have to understand 5th edition literally had just come out. Like literally, I went to the release at the comic store or the game store, which was the Game Master Games, which is now closed, sadly. But we were in there, midnight release, got the 5th edition book, sat down, built the character, not knowing, and I was like, I want to play a dwarf bard. And this was before the current edition changes where you can move stats and kind of have stats where you need them, right? So I had a mediocre charisma because bards did the dwarf didn't get a stat bump to the bard, and we were just using the stat array, the 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. I forgot where I put 8 in intelligence because I want them to be like more bardy, but not as smart. But like, so I remember I had like this low score. And I think it was like a 15. So it wasn't low by any means. It was just a +2. But just having that +2, I felt bad because there were other people like God forbid I played with a half elf. There was a half elf paladin in my party when we played, and they just out-talked me on everything because their statistics were higher than mine. They had the 16 going in, and so I'd walk up and I was like, hey, blah blah blah, like XYZ. This is me doing the best I can with my +2. DM's like, roll for it. I roll. I got like a 12 +2 is 14. And the DM's like, oh, you need, obviously needed the 15 to get past the guard. So you hear the clink clink and it doesn't work. And then the half elf shows up and is like, hey, my friend over here, he's just trying to, like, how can we make this happen? Okay, roll. Got the 12 plus the 3, 15, and then there's a ding check. And I was just like, oh man, like I put really a lot of heart into that. And then this other character rolled up because statistically they were better than me. They just rolled. Like, I acted out. I did what Steve said. The DM's like, well, how do you persuade them? And I acted out. I'm just like, hey, man, you're a dwarf. I'm a dwarf. We got dwarf things going on. Look at my beard. Look at your beard. Let's talk about beard stuff. Oh, have you used coconut oil in your beard? Really smooths it out. Not the beard! And I built up like a friendship with this other dwarf guard. We had beard recipes. And all of a sudden, like, roll. Boom, sad statistics. Now, obviously, right, like Fabio's right. Like I could have gotten advantage if the GM was like that, right? And obviously it's all dependent on your GM. But that's where I'm coming from is like, I feel like in that situation, obviously that needed to be a persuasion check because I'm trying to now think like how else would that have rolled out, right? Like maybe it's wisdom because I was like, I was perceiving they're a dwarf and I was using our cultural similarities with each other to allow me to kind of get through. So it would have been like maybe a wisdom check or something. But I was sad. And then the stupid half elf paladin was just like, sup, bro? And then, got that 13 plus 3, 16. All of a sudden the dwarf is like, I love you, man. Where have you been, half elf? And I was like, dude, we bonded over beard products. What the fuck?
So the It's kind of like two parts of the same conversation that we're having here, because if I'm the player coming from that perspective and I go, okay, well, how can I explain that the fact I'm using a different stat is as much of me trying to explain how I'm getting that advantage or how am I getting that +2? Like, what I may not know exactly what to say. Also, the fact that, look, say I'm not the greatest at going in and kind of explaining my actions, and I'm more like, well, I have this +5, and that's because the sheet says it has a +5. The more you as a DM kind of open up and say, okay, well, I see the person's trying. Maybe they don't know the exact thing to say, but then Fabio comes along and he doesn't have a high stat, but he goes and embellishes the whole thing and talks the guy up and he's talking about beard stuff, and then he gets advantage. That should hopefully trigger in my head that it's not just on the paper. It's like, if I don't know exactly what to say, I can say, well, here's what I mean when I make this check, and then that hopefully opens up the park to, I may not be as charismatic. No, look, when I was playing Balin, I'm not lifting up like stone doors like Conan and he's holding the thing up and having people pass under him, right? I'm not that guy, but I like playing like the barbarian character.
He was.
So, and again, if I talk about like intelligence guy, like sometimes I play hyper intelligent characters. I'm not hyper intelligent. I'm average intelligence. So when when we're playing these charisma characters, you may be playing a character way up above and beyond what you have in your head, because look, magic isn't real in real life. So I don't know how to cast a fireball, but it happens in the game. So the same thing when it comes to like charisma, like you may be playing a character that's much more charisma focused or charismatic than you actually can be in real life. But then you can see other players embellishing things. And instead of saying, okay, well, what do I say? I don't know what to say. Here's how I hamming him up. Right. I want to find an attribute that we have in common and ham that character up for, the 5 or 10 minutes that we're talking. And then I'm really trying to make a connection with this character. I didn't tell the DM I'm saying these words. I'm just saying, here's how I view the conversation going. And then, okay, well, the DM says, okay, well, now you're going to get this +2, or now you're going to get that advantage, or something like that. Or you can get out of the disadvantage that maybe there was a previous situation giving you disadvantage. Now you've compensated for that. Now you're rolling just a straight check. So if other people do it, that should inform the players who are not good at the physical verbiage that those things that they can do in some way.
I agree. I'm going to say something that's definitely going to make me sound like the stick in the mud and oh God, of course, he's the guy that freaking said it. But yes, I'm going to be the guy that says it. We're playing a role-playing game. It's role-playing. All right. And this is coming from somebody who has a history of being a murder hobo. All right. Hardcore murder hobo. We're playing a role-playing game. And I get it. We all understand that, like, not everybody's going to know exactly what to say in every situation, but it's like the whole point is to try. I will say this, DMs out there, don't force your characters to be charismatic. Don't force them to have to act out every single thing. If you ever feel forced to do something, I don't like that. But I like saying, hey, what do you say? Or how do you do this? Or what are you trying to say? Say something to me. Give me a picture. Say the words that I need to hear so I understand the outcome that you're looking for, right? Because if you do that, I'm good at being, flowery and descriptive, and I can give you and paint a picture for you so that you can say, oh, cool. Because then that could possibly help you moving forward. If you have other people that are excel at it, watch what they're doing. Go like, oh, okay, he did that. Oh, that was a great performance. Fantastic. Somebody's reciting King Lear in order to, distract the crowd. Okay, cool. And then they actually start doing that. I gotta give them advantage. I have to, because that's something that they used within themselves to help their character succeed in a situation, right? And I feel that, like, when you're role playing and you're trying to make this happen, and since that's the first word in the game that we're playing, I feel that you're taking that role, you're playing it up perfectly, and you're getting everybody to get into it. And if you don't know what to say, somebody will help you out, and hopefully you'll say the right things to make things succeed, get yourself advantage, get yourself bonuses, or at least explain perfectly to the crowd or to your other players and your DM what's happening. I think, and this is something that Jared was saying before that I definitely wanted to touch on. One of the things that we suffer from a lot is a lot of people just want to play it like a video game where they're like, I have these stats. I want to hit people. I want to hurt things. I want to do damage. That's why I play these games. I'm not going to lie. I want to jack stuff up, right? I want to see big numbers all the time, right? But at the same time, I like when I have interactions with people and it turns into like these hysterical stories that we like hold off and we tell everybody for years, right? Like one of my games that I know Jared loves talking about where I literally scared a dude to death, right?
I've heard about this story.
Fun, you know, like, and our last one was like when I distracted someone, I sing heresy, right? That was fun. All these things add into the fun of the game, add into the depth of your characters, and can sometimes add into the seriousness of the game. I think one of the things that does happen is people get into social interactions and they'll have like charisma stats where it's intimidate, persuasion, deception, whatever, and they try to do something and they don't get the outcome that they're looking for. If you can explain the outcome that you're looking for, you'll have a higher chance of having it happen than just saying, I'm rolling deception. I rolled a 19. Okay, what do you say to him? I just want him to believe me so I can get through here. Okay, give me a little bit more, or like try and like so I can understand exactly what you know. It's like, oh, I lied to him about his shoelaces being untied. Okay, fantastic. You rolled a 19. He stares at his shoes, realizes, but they're tied. Maybe I'm missing something. He unties and reties his shoes for the next minute. You rolled well. You explained to me what you're doing. And then it's going through and goes, now that guy's like, oh, I'm going to use this move a lot. I hit him with the look over there. I think that's something that we've all dealt with where we had a charismatic character. It didn't pan out. And you're like, man, I'm just going to go back to breaking stuff because I'm good at that. Let me stab things because this is easier. You know, role playing isn't always that easy, but it's very rewarding. Just like fighting isn't always that easy, but it's a lot of fun.
So I feel Fabio made an excellent point there. Fabio's point about like giving the GM something to play with, and by having that, like the GM is able to take what the player does, right? Their role play, as Fabio says, that's the name of the game. It's a role playing game. By taking that role play and then kind of building upon it, it kind of incentivizes the player to give them a little more next time they get into a situation. Obviously, it's not going to happen every time, but it should happen. It should start happening, right? It's positive enforcement versus negative enforcement, which I think a lot of GMs need to, which can be a different conversation, is the pros and cons of positive versus negative reinforcement. Like, hey, this becomes way more fun, or I don't need to like have these epic soliloquies prepped. I could just do something, right? And not all of us are Critical Role thespians, right? Like we're not voice actors. We're not these amazing thespians. We're doing this for fun. I still feel it hampers players' creativity. I think maybe, you know, if maybe because my actions, my personal takes have all been negative. Like I saw this one. I'm just going to jump into this real quick story. I saw a time with Fabio. I thought Fabio broke a table because he was like so aggressive with his role play. And like he was like, in the role play, he was like yelling and stuff. And then the GM was just like, okay, roll intimidate. And like, I was like, why is there a roll? In my head, I was like, there should have been 0 roll because like, it was like, he was shaking the table and he was aggressive about what was happening. And it was like very good. And it was amazing to like see that. And then I was like, there should not have been a roll or like, and I feel like that's where I'm coming from is like, I see the times where my friends and my players have these amazing, spectacular moments. And then the GM's like, roll. And then the roll is never equal, right? Like the roll is never a nat 20. It's always like a 2. And they're like, yeah, all right. You know what I mean? Like that's
roll again,
right? Like that's the advantage. That's when you should have the advantage. Or, you know, sadly with Pathfinder, it would probably be a +1, which wouldn't really change anything, but maybe you give advantage or a hero point, right? Like a hero point should get you that so that they would take the nod of this is my canonical my Pathfinder advantage token I'm giving you right now.
Oh, that was good. Here's a hero point.
Yeah, like you should
use it right now.
You know, and maybe that's where I need to learn a little bit more as a GM. But I still stand. I think it does. I feel it taxes away on my players. Fabio, you disagree, but also it's still a learning process for all of us. We're not master G. There's no master. It's more of an art than it is like all great artists at the end of their life. They're like, oh, what? Like you mastered this, and they're like, no, I never mastered it. I'm still learning. There's still stuff to learn. And that I think that's what makes you great as a great artist, right? We're all artists. My favorite part was in all my games to this day was actually between Fabio and Steve. And this was a role play scenario where Steve was being seduced by Shayless. And
I'm glad this never hit air.
Steve, this was before it never hit air. So Steve was being seduced by Shayless, right? So the NPC female was seducing Steve. And then Steve didn't have a retort to what was happening. I just picked the die up and looked at it. And then Fabio goes, there ain't no roll for that, bro. That was like the moment, like my epiphany of like where I kind of came to my God, where it was like this, like charisma limits you. Because Steve was like, I have numerical values and there should be a roll. And Fabio understood the like role play aspect. He was like, no, this is role play. There is no numerical role. And so that's kind of the funny part about it is like the two conversations we were having here, numerical and role play. So with all of that being said, I want to give Fabio a huge thank you for being here with us. Hopefully we'll have more of these roundtable talks. Steve, as always, it's a pleasure. Your insight and your neutrality is always greatly used, as Steve is the
always lawful neutral.
Yeah, lawful neutral.
Lawful neutral.
So with that being said, let us know in the comments down below on your take on charisma. Do you think it should be part of the game? Do you think it should be removed? Do you think it needs more stats, like skills, that it should affect? Whatever your take is, just let us know and tell us your favorite role-playing experience in the comment thingy boxes in the bottom where you feed the algorithm. You have to feed the machine. Feed it.
Feed the machine. Tell us what you want. Tell us what you want.
So from all of us here at Nothing Ventured, Nothing Game, we love rolling dice, giving advice with a little bit of that New York spice. Say goodbye, everyone.
Later.